Is cannabis a psychedelic? According to a new review, maybe. Let's take a look at the data. I'm Lex Pelger. I do Canna Education for CV Sciences, the makers of Plus CBD, who has excellent CBD and THC products for twisting and untwisting your head. First, two things to note. This article is behind a paywall. I emailed Vandrew for a copy of it, and he never got back to me. Poor show. So instead, I rated the publicly available references list. 2. The science of whether cannabis is a psychedelic is really not that important. It's more fun to go over what's out there. What's really important is what we experience. So if you have stories about cannabis causing a psychedelic effect in your life, I would love to hear them, and so would the other readers here. Not to surprise you, but there's a lot of different ways to define what counts as a psychedelic. But for the most neurochemically based way to look at it, you would say that a classic psychedelic is one that binds the 5-HT2A receptor, which is the one at the top of this list of the many types of serotonin receptors out there. CBD does bind to this 5-HT2A receptor, and as far as I know, THC doesn't, but it seems to increase the levels of that receptor. And of course, there's a well-known effect of cannabis enhancing and strengthening a psychedelic trip, perhaps via the serotonin receptors, perhaps via some other mechanism. Like the classic psychedelics, cannabis can induce feelings of oceanic boundlessness. Like the classic psychedelics, cannabis can cause emotional breakthroughs, mystical experiences, and changes in things like depression levels. And on the negative side, like the classic psychedelics, cannabis can cause persisting perception disorders where the audio or visual hallucinations or stimuli don't stop for days, weeks, or months after your experience. Also, what do the people say? Here's a survey of people using cannabis as an entheogen, which is the current buzzword for using a drug spiritually. And people compare it to their use of psychedelics, and usually they have a pretty distinct delineation between classic psychedelics and using cannabis spiritually. But still, some people say they do use cannabis as a spiritual tool, and it gives them experiences of insight, connectedness, joy, love, and unity with transcendent forces. Finally, there's the long use in world religions about using cannabis to cause peak experiences as well as spiritual effects, as you can see in this excellent review article by Mark Ferreira, who's also the author of Sacred Bliss, which is a great book on this topic. So is cannabis a psychedelic? According to sticklers, the answer is no, absolutely not. But for people who use these entheogens in the real world, they often include cannabis as a psychedelic. And I myself would include ketamine as a psychedelic dissociative, as well as plant medicines like salvia and Amanita muscaria mushrooms. While none of these work primarily via serotonin receptors, they still cause experiences that many people consider to be psychedelic. While cannabis won't meet the strict neuropharmacological definition of a psychedelic, we must remember that in 1956, when Dr. Humphrey Osmond coined the term psychedelic, meaning mind manifesting, he wrote to his buddy Dr. Aldous Huxley saying, "To fathom hell or soar angelic, just take a pinch of psychedelic." And I think cannabis can certainly do that. Just look at Fitzhugh Ludlow.